Good day, everyone. You got the pause on me. I was like, I wasn't ready.
I was allowed to jump in, or I could.
I liked how you both, like, where everyone's looking at the camera, then you both kind of looked at me at the same time. So, good day. Welcome to our Q&A podcast. Happy Wednesday to you if you are listening Wednesday. If you're not, then happy whatever day it is of the week. But,
the last time we were here was recording for our teaching last week.
Yeah.
So maybe you were just, in that headspace, you didn't realize we were live.
Yes, sorry. We're ready. All right.
That's all good.
So, let's jump in. We got a good question right off the top here. So, here goes. Hello.
Hi.
I would like to know your opinions on premarital sex. Do you believe that individuals should abstain even into the Middle Ages? Should they not find the suitable partner?
Yes.
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 Yes to the first part.
Yes,
Yeah.
because
There's a continuation.
Yes. So, but I just want to make sure. The question is, it says, do you believe that individuals should abstain even in the Middle Ages? And we should say yes.
Yes.
And then, should they not find a suitable partner? Married, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, second part of the question.
Because then it says follow up if yes.
If
That's
yes.
why.
So,
That's why we didn't go beyond that.
right. It says, what if you have previously been married? There are quite a few studies that show the benefits of this activity in loving relationships. Would this mean that only those who are married are allowed to reap these benefits? Does this not encourage hasty decisions? I assume that means into marriage, probably.
Yes.
Yep.
I would imagine so.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, what if you have been previously married but are now not? I would say that God designed sex to be within the confines of marriage.
Yep.
So if you find yourself outside of marriage, whether that be through the death of a spouse or through divorce, I think those would be the only two ways you'd find yourself,
Outside
in that
marriage.
place.
Yeah.
Then yes, then you are back in a place where you would be abstaining from sex.
Yeah.
For sure, there are benefits to sex within marriage, absolutely, and I think those studies show the intention of God's, the proof of God's wisdom in the design and the way that and the way that He designed sex to work properly. And I think that when you get to the place where you're operating outside of God's design, then those benefits become negatives.
Yeah, I
So-
would agree with that. And I would say there's benefit as well, and I've thought about this quite a bit the last few years, but there's benefits to having self-discipline, right? And to having self-control. And I think that goes with anything, like when we're abstaining from things, or we're purposely even doing fasting, whether we're fasting from foods or other things, we are learning this discipline that seems like God wants us to learn, because there's a whole bunch of things in the Bible that He asks us to abstain from or use in moderation or anything like that. Although I think most people would say sex is something that they desire or they want or whatever else. I still think that abstaining and learning that self-discipline, like you said, Doug, at the end of your comment, the benefit to that is much greater than the negative of working outside of what God would want for us.
Yeah.
So I'll say that.
So in today's world it's a hard one to say this. Not hard to say that, no, this is what we think is what God's plan is, but a hard one because culturally it is so cultural. And I think the saying yes to that first part, there's a lot of assumptions that come on what the implications are then for the people in that situation. And because our culture has so hyped sex up to such a high level, and to be honest, the church has for so long matched that and also failed to come around the people who are outside of marriage, it really means an assumed life of loneliness and a lack of a lot of things more than just the sexual benefit of marriage. There's a book by Ed Shaw called The Plausibility Problem. It was about for people who were gay and decided to abstain, and that was God's plan, how He saw it. But he said that's not a plausible life, to just be single and alone and be outside of the rest of the church who are all married and in the nuclear family, because we've raised that up to be such a great idol. That I really believe as Christians, as a Christian culture, we have failed to talk about chastity in a good way, and singleness in good ways. And I read, now the Catholics have some of the best teaching on this, and Anglicans follow shortly behind. on the benefits of chastity even within marriage. You talked about even choosing to fast within marriage. Paul encourages that for times. But even how we think about sex, I believe, is a part of the conversation of chastity. Chastity isn't just abstinence, but I believe chastity is a whole view on sexuality, which we miss. And so, yes, there's lack on anything that we may give up for the sake of Christ, but he doesn't call anyone to do that without having experienced himself. 33-year-old man, still single. Paul, seemingly his whole life in singleness, and encouraging others to do the same. So there's an added and yet different benefit, I think, that can be found in that I, for lack of being able to put it another way, I also miss out on in my marriage. I've looked at friends who were in their careers, both in pastoring and outside of, and go, you can really get something different out of your career and what you can do in life and how you can contribute to the world and to the church in different ways because you're single and not married. So traded off benefit for in most people's eyes that maybe seems like a secondary shot, but I really think there's just a difference that we can all gain in different places. And so yes, there's absolutely a now studied loss that somebody may have in losing that, but I think that there's a different gain that may be out there as well. Just trying to be maybe pastoral on the question.
I was going to say, and the last part of the question, does this not encourage hasty decisions?
Yeah.
I would say, yes, it does. I mean, there's lots of teenagers that have got married for years. Forget about middle-aged people.
Yeah.
You know, if you find someone under the age of 25 getting married, you could probably ask them what church they belong to pretty easily, right?
Well, I'd say it's our culture that set up the hasty decisions, not the biblical teaching, right?
Right,
Our
yeah.
culture has not set it up for somebody to be healthy and happy and single in most churches
right.
into those ages, because we don't talk about sex and sexuality and singleness and chastity in ways that are beneficial. So the only seeming option is get married or burn.
I think that the bigger issue is not that we don't talk about it.
Right.
Because there's a million things we could talk about, and there's only a limited amount we can talk about.
Yep.
And I've preached on sex at various times, but there's always important topics to talk about.
Yep.
I think that the bigger issue is that as the church, we have, like you said, catered to the nuclear family because we've elevated that as the ideal, and everybody who doesn't fit into that ideal, we've kind of ostracized. And that's not a biblical thing. That's going back 50 years. Most people lived in a nuclear family, so it was easy to just target those people. When Jesus came to establish a kingdom that became a community for people who didn't fit in other places, and it's a tremendous tragedy that we have taken that idea, that beautiful idea of a kingdom that welcomes all of the people who don't fit in somewhere else, and we've turned it into a place that excludes people who don't fit into the model that we fit in, that we think they should be. It's terrible that we have done that, and that we have catered ministries to couples only and just structured the whole thing. And I think that it's also just a reflection of the fact that the church is way behind the times in where the world is, which makes it really hard to reach out into the world and love the world like Christ loved the church, like we're called to. Like Christ calls us to love. We're not called to come and listen to somebody talk. We're called to be the church. We're called to become this community of people who go out into the world and find people who don't fit, and bring them in and say, you have a place here. And that should include single people. And if we don't have space in our homes and in our lives for people who are single, then we're doing something wrong. And that's a terrible, terrible thing. Does it encourage hasty decisions? I would also say yes, to add to that. But I would also think something you said I really liked, and it reminded me that early in your first answer, you talked about self-control and the importance of self-control. I can remember as a young man, before I ever got married, ever knew who I was going to marry, a pastor saying to me, yes, there's a verse in the Bible that says it is better to marry than to burn, but self-control is better than them both. And said, if you think that marriage is going to solve your problem with lust, you are going to be sorely mistaken. It doesn't. I'm sorry if you're single and I'm crushing your dreams right now. but it doesn't.
Yeah, and it doesn't in your middle ages either. I mean, I have relationships with people who have lost spouses or one way or another find themselves single. And sex is not the thing. If they're out there doing that or if they're not doing it, that's not the thing. The relationship is the thing, right? And having self-control with the sex leads to better relationships always. That is a proven thing. So.
There's a book on the shelf somewhere behind Doug. I can't find where the title is, but the church has wrestled with this for a long time, and there's this really interesting book. I think it's actually a part of a series where they take early church writings and compare them on a certain subject, and that one was comparing a bunch of early church writing on what Christians should do with sex and sexuality. And some were arguing that Christians should never marry. Now, that was counter to some of Paul's writing, but they should never marry, and our only children will be through making disciples, and that's how we'll continue to expand. We'll let the heathens have kids, and we'll save them into the fold after. That was the extreme position, and others were all for marriage, and so the church has done a really good job, I think, throughout our history of wrestling with this subject. I just don't know if we're in the middle of such a moment right now in most church circumstances.
We also are in a moment where a lot of churches reject all our history.
Yes.
Instead of standing on the shoulders of those people and moving forward, I see some who just go, that history is everything, and we shouldn't go farther than it. And I see people on the other side who are like, well, all those people didn't know anything, and we're moving into something new because God's finally shown us what's really happening. Like that was all just the prelude leading to this wonderful moment we find ourselves in.
Totally. White American Christianity.
Well, I think it's
not just American.
Well, the version of American Christianity that's bled everywhere.
North American.
Yes.
I was going to say, we've talked about this a lot, though, with greater theology and with church stuff. When I think of you talking about standing on the shoulders or discarding it altogether, it's living in the mess. Like there's a tension with following Christ. And we always just default to whatever's comfortable, right? If I'm the one who wants to stick with everything that is historically true and I don't want to go any further, it's because I don't want the mess of what could be. And if I'm the one who wants to discard it all, it's because, well, I don't want to deal with the mess that was, right? Rather than going, both these things are real, how do we move forward following Jesus, right? So
I think C.S. Lewis talks about sex at one point in Mere Christianity, is it? Where he's talking about, he sets up an imaginary scenario. I don't think he actually had this happen. He was, because there was a child asking, will there be sex in heaven? and the guy talking, he couldn't, he didn't think that there would be sex in heaven, and that was of concern to the boy, and he used the analogy of like trying to tell a kid who thinks a sucker he has is the greatest thing that's ever existed, and saying, no, there's way better in life still available, and heaven will be even greater, but there won't be any suckers. And he's like, I can't even imagine what that would be like. It just came back to mind, and I was thinking, like, there's something that some may miss out on for a time now, but there's so much greater available. We don't know what that is one day.
On the other hand, C.S. Lewis, in his Perilenka trilogy, his Perilenka, Voyage to Venus, and That Hideous Strength. And at the end of That Hideous Strength, I won't get into the whole plot, but there's people, there's some couples that are there, and there ends up being a bunch of animals, and the end of the book is all the animals and all the people go off and have sex. That's literally how the book ends.
Oh, that's awesome. I haven't finished the third one, so there you go.
I want, like, that's it's not integral to the plot, but I remember reading the book being like, didn't see that coming.
Right back to last week's question.
Not with each other.
I was just kidding.
That's the climax. That's the, all right. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. It says in Matthew, Transfiguration of Jesus, he tells the disciples with him that John the Baptist was Elijah. Does that mean that John the Baptist was the reincarnation of Elijah? I'm confused.
We had a similar question to this a bit ago, and thank you for asking that. Was it the same or similar?
It was about reincarnation. Does Christianity believe in reincarnation? And they used the John the Baptist, like Elijah, as the example.
So I would say no. And Jesus is not saying he's the reincarnation. He's saying that he's got the same sort of ministry. If you go back into the Old Testament and you look in Malachi 3, where is the first part of this? I can't find the first part of Malachi 3, but in Malachi 4, right at the end of the Old Testament, it says this: Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. And we know that Jesus brought the day of the Lord. That is what he brought. Now, the Old Testament prophets, they didn't understand what that meant. They had a skewed understanding of it. But there is this prophetic word that is right at the end of the Old Testament that says, I will send you Elijah. And it's not that I'm going to reincarnate Elijah, but it's more that I'm going to send somebody in that same sort of ministry of preparation, of getting people ready. That John and Elijah had a similar ministry role, one in the Old Testament and one in the New Testament.
It's not a perfect fit of an example too, but Paul refers to Jesus as the second Adam. We don't believe Jesus is a reincarnated Adam, but in the same office of the start of humanity, the one to set the tone and the pace and the trajectory of how to live in perfect harmony with God, with creation, and with others. And so Jesus comes in and steps into that role as the second. Maybe thinking of John as the second Elijah might be a better understanding than as Elijah. But, yeah.
Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that. That's
Cool.
I think that's it.
All right.
Good
All
one.
right. Well, that's our podcast for today. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and send in more questions because we're out again. So keep them coming. We're excited.
We need your help.
Yeah.
Yep.
We will wish you a good week and talk to you later.
See you,
See you
everyone.
soon.